Hi, I'm Malcolm.
And I'm Rachel. We're two Canadians living on our 39-foot mainship trawler, living an adventure of a lifetime. We invite you to follow along as we travel 6,000 miles through Canadian and U.S. waterways around America's Great Loop. Ahoy from Stay Cool.
Hi, we have a list of all the questions you've asked us for the Q&A, and today we're going to go through them and hopefully provide you with the answers for each of them.
The first group of questions is about the Great Loop, and Lauren asks, what is the reason behind doing the Great Loop? When did you first realize it was something that you wanted to do?
We'll try and keep this short. When we were kids, we grew up in and around a place called Westport, Ontario. Lots of big boats were there. We'd go and eat our ice cream cones. We were talking to some of the boaters, and that's where we first realized that there was something called the Great Loop. And we'd always aspired to, own one of these big boats. That's really where it started many, many years ago. And it was a dream that we'd do it. And it's just stuck with us all this time. So that's how it began, and we realized that dream, and we're doing it now.
And we really learned about it from other boaters, like asking them where they're going, and I guess that's how we found out about the loop itself.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to that question. Next question is, what is one thing you're most excited about for the Great Loop journey, and what is one thing that scares you? I think we're excited just to go and explore new areas. There isn't one specific thing, but we're excited to challenge ourselves with new situations, new experiences. Yeah. And the one thing that scares us,
weather. So the one thing that really scares us is weather. I mean,
is bad weather.
Bad weather, yeah. That's right. Good weather doesn't scare us at all, but bad weather does scare us, and we are doing as much as we can in planning and looking at weather and forecasts to make sure we don't run into that bad weather.
And really, it's putting us and the boat in jeopardy is what scares us. So a situation where maybe we have looked at the weather and we thought we could manage, and we get out there and it's bad weather and we actually have to abandon the boat and maybe put ourselves at personal risk for injury, that's pretty much what scares us.
That's the extreme, and obviously all the planning we're doing will hopefully avoid any of that. But we do get uncomfortable every now and again. There's been a couple little journeys. So those are the limits, but bad weather is probably the thing that is the one that it's on our radar. It's one that we are constantly looking at. So those are great questions, Lauren. Thanks.
Next is a little question or a little section on camera equipment. James asked, what camera equipment are you using? And we have never done anything like this before. YouTube videos, we're kind of camera shy actually. So we're literally only using an iPhone to take videos. We don't have any special microphones, so you'll notice there's wind noise and that sort of thing. Don't plan to do anything about that, just what it is. And another question, what type of, same question actually, what are you using to make the videos? And someone has a comment about using a drone for some altitude shots, and that's a really great question from Callow G. Yeah,
so we do have a drone. We're learning the ropes of using a drone on a boat. It's a little different than on the land. It's a little unnerving, to be honest with you, when you're flying your drone off the boat, because everything moves, so including the drone. So we're getting more comfortable. I think you'll see a few more drone shots in our future, as long as the drone doesn't disappear into the water somewhere. No, those are great questions. So James, Cool Beans, and Callow G, thank you for your questions.
The next section is about locking and mooring and anchoring. Thomas asked, do you have to pay to use the locks? And we don't know if you have to pay to use the locks in the States yet, but in Canada, yes, you do have to pay to use the locks. And here, because we've been boating here for years, we know that ahead of the season, Parks Canada, who operates all the locks in various waterways in Canada, offers you a pass. So you can buy a pass, which is cheaper if you're going to be doing a lot of locking. So we always did that, and we did again this year. They also offer a mooring pass, which is separate. Actually, we got a kind of a combined one. Yep. So that's a good way to save a bit of money.
And if you're interested and you are about to do the loop in the next year, If you buy it early, so if you buy it, I think it's before March 1st or
March 31st.
31st, you get a 10% discount on both. So you can actually save a bit of money, knowing that you're gonna have it. And we use when we're in locks, we use the lock walls a lot. So it's very convenient. It's a great way to enjoy the lock systems, and at the same time have some mooring that really is already paid for under the past system that you've already purchased.
Yeah, so good question, Thomas. Cool Beans asks, do you normally overnight at anchor or marinas or tie up at walls? So it kind of depends where we are. If we're going along, say, the Trent Severn waterway system, we will use the walls because we've already paid to moor there, and it's kind of nice to stop there and go and see little towns along the way. If we are in a lake, like we are kind of now, our first preference is to anchor because it's the most peaceful and quiet. And usually if the wind allows, we will anchor.
Yep.
Right?
And all anchors are free. Walls, it could be free. It depends on where you are. And marina is obviously going to pay for.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add for the locks is, and the walls, they have facilities. And some of them even have showers. And it's free for those. Free, I say, as long as you pay for your pass to use them. So that's another thing we take advantage of, and they're usually very well maintained. So they're nice places to stay.
Some might charge a little extra for showers, but usually they're included. Yep.
And some may charge a little extra for power. So
That's true.
Even though mooring is covered under your pass,
Yep.
the power is usually certainly in the law it's $10 or $11
like
Canadian.
And then about marinas, we will use marinas if we're going to encounter some bad weather. Or if we just want to go stay at that town, I guess. And also to reprovision. We might stop there for a day or two to do that. So we have stayed for up to 3 nights, I think, in one place because of weather. So that was okay. We didn't mind doing that.
No,
but it is more expensive than anchoring.
It is, and there are some choices there as well. If you go to a municipal marina and you just want to stop for a quick day to go in and reprovision, in some cases that's free. You can just show up, you tie up, but you're not going to stay overnight. You can get into town, do what you need to do, come back, and then you leave.
That's
and
true.
that can be free. There's no cost to that. And then, if you're staying overnight, there's always going to be a cost for that. Certainly in the marinas that are around here, and I assume anywhere.
Yeah.
It's very. When you go into a marina, typically there's power available, there's water available, and they'll have services, obviously like washrooms and showers, and some have laundries.
Yeah.
So it can be very convenient when you have bad weather or when you just need to get into a marina and take a break.
Yeah. Good question. And Swim Dog asks, what is the water temperature in your anchorage? That was probably specific to one location, but generally up in Canada in this area, the water temperature in larger waters, it's deeper, so it's anywhere from 20 to sort of 23 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, I have to work that out. And in narrower or shallower waterways, usually a little warmer than that. So, 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. So really comfortable for swimming. Both temperatures actually. 20 to 23 is a little cooler, but it's manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Swim Dog, I don't know. You say aloha in your message, so maybe you're in Hawaii. I don't know. If you are, you're not going to get the same temperatures in water here as you will there, but you'll get fresh water.
It's refreshing.
It is. It is. I'm always told when I'm the last one in, it's so refreshing. You're going to love it.
Yeah, and that's through clenched teeth.
Yes.
It's very refreshing. Yes.
And it usually is.
Zilla Comfort Dog says, I notice you anchor often. You're asking for chart details and what the holding was like. That's a lot of information to include for every single place that we anchor, and a really great resource for that information is the app, what's it called?
Active Captain.
Active Captain, and people leave their notes on certain places. So you can actually see on the map where people have anchored, and they will write down, the year they did it and what the holding was like and what the weather was like, any notes basically.
They will. They'll offer it and tell you what protection, like wind protection.
Yep.
So if there's a good anchorage for south and west winds,
Yep.
they'll put that in there. We should update a few of the ones we've stayed at. The other thing we always look for is good holding. So and in this area, when they say good holding, it's normally clay, sand, mud. It's and we've had some areas where there's been lots of wind and very good holding. So but you're right. There's lots of islands, 30,000 islands.
Yeah.
You've got to pick and choose. Going to cruising guides, looking on Active Captain, seeing what other people have done, and then picking out where you want to go.
And some people just choose an anchorage that no one's ever been to, and they just try it.
That's right.
And then they can add their notes. So, we sort of will add our notes to those apps, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so the next section is about route planning and travel from our home location. Steamer 6023 asks about route planning through the Great Lakes. Planned route versus actual traveled route. What are some of the decisions that led you to certain ways? I think we can both answer that the same way, and it's always weather. Weather will predict exactly where we go. So we've done that a couple of times. One time we were traveling within a narrow channel, and we came towards open water, and it was very flat. So we said, we're going out. So we did. We went out to open water, and other times we have kept, hug the shore or go in an inner channel to stay away from strong winds.
You're absolutely right. So weather is one of the primary motivators for where we go. The other is, we need to go west. So that's the direction we need to head. So we'll look forward at certain options, but we'll have multiple options. We won't necessarily decide on any one of them, but weather will guide where we're going to go. So if we're going to an anchorage, we'll look at all the anchorages, and then we'll look at the weather and say, okay, we need north protection or south protection. And then that will then eliminate the north ones, and we'll look to the south ones. So it's, you've got to be very flexible. You have to have an idea, a high level idea, but then you need to bring in those factors that will really dictate where you're going to end up that night.
Very good question. And Steamer 6023 also asks and is curious about our personal must-see places along the way. And we were talking about this earlier. I don't think we really have specific places that are must-see. I think we're very open-minded to seeing whatever a new place has to offer. And most often, the things that you don't know about are the most surprising and interesting. So it's not anything that we've planned in advance. It's just to go and explore different areas and see new things.
Yeah, I think there's, and that's absolutely right. I think there's a couple of big things that we know we want to do. One is we want to dip the nose of the boat into the Lake Superior. So we're going to do that. That's on our list. We know there's another one, which is we want to go to the Bahamas. So those are two big things. There's all sorts of little things that happen there, and many of the best things we found are things we didn't expect.
Yep.
Whether it's a port you go into that you're pleasantly surprised, or tall ship sails by that you never thought you're going to see tall ships. You just don't know. So there's a lot of great things out here. Some of them you would never know about until you actually show up.
Yeah, that's right. But there's tons of books about things to see along the way. And if that's sort of your thing to plan and be very specific about what you see, then you can definitely do that.
Yep, absolutely right.
So next question, Marcus asks, how are the rules for leaving your home province for extended periods? And do you plan to dock the boat and go back to your home province at some point so you don't lose your health coverage? And that's a very good question. For Canadians, we do have health coverage. So yes, I think for most provinces, I think you'd have to check with your own home province. Most provinces, it's up to 6 months, and that's true for our home province. And we will be docking our boat at some point and going back home to visit family as well, and take care of some personal business at home. And so yes, that is how we're going to handle it.
It is, and I'll add a little piece to it. Being Canadians, and Marcus, I assume you're a Canadian since you're asking that question. We've also got additional insurance when we travel in the States.
Absolutely.
So, and that travel insurance requires you to do the same thing. It requires you to come back to your home province at the end of 180 days, and then you can leave back again. So there's that. There's also something you need to be concerned, or not concerned, but aware of from a U.S. standpoint. If you're a Canadian traveling in the U.S., you've got to be cognizant of the fact that you may be subject to U.S. Federal tax rules. And there's, I'm not going to get into all the details here, but you do need to make sure that you can fill out the appropriate forms so you don't actually get taxed on your income while you're in the States. So it's a lot of people, I think snowbirds know all about it. Us as loopers for the first time didn't know about it. So, but it is something that you need to be aware of, just so that you can avoid having any kind of IRS problems when you leave the States.
It might be worth talking to a tax accountant about it if it's of concern to you.
Yeah, it would. Just to get the insights. It's safe than sorry.
Yep, absolutely. Last question in this section is from Mark. He asks about the boat size limits for the Trent Severn Waterway and the bridge clearance. So specifically for the Trent Severn, it might not apply to other Canadian canals like the Rideau Canal, but the Trent Severn limits are a boat that is 84 feet long and 23 feet wide with a draft of 6 feet, and the bridge clearance is 20 feet. So our boat is much smaller than that.
Yes, we're way smaller than that. So unless you've got a very large boat, you typically with the Trent 7 you don't have an issue.
Yeah.
Usually the limiting factor is draft.
Yeah.
So a sailboat potentially could have much deeper than 6 feet, and the mast is obviously usually an issue.
Yeah, for bridges. Yeah.
But for a trawler, depending on what your budget is, and maybe your budget will afford you an 84-foot boat. But normally from a trawler standpoint, you don't have any issues with any of the bridges, any of the clearance, and any of the size of the locks. You'll be more than able to accommodate your passage.
Okay, next section is about our solar system on our boat. Lauren, Thomas, Cool Beans, Gregory, and Zila all had questions specifically about our solar power. And we will be addressing specifically a solar episode coming up middle of August.
Middle of August
coming up.
So yeah, and we appreciate all the questions,
Yeah.
and that actually made us think maybe we need to do a separate session on it. So
Yeah.
we have, and just as a I don't want to say a teaser, but just as a teaser for it, we do use our solar tremendously, exclusively almost. For hot water, power, lights, etc. So we'll get into more of that detail in the dedicated session.
Yeah, but thank you for asking, and that's really good. And we have a lot of interest from people who see our boat too, so you're not alone there. And more people are using solar. We're seeing more solar panels on boats, and that's really good.
It is. Normally you'd only see solar on sailboats,
Yeah.
and now we're seeing solar on lots of trawlers. Everybody starts seeing the benefits of using solar. It's free energy.
And the more people that do it, the cheaper it becomes. So, I mean, it's easier for people to add a little bit of solar to their boat.
It does. And keeping in mind, everybody has their own preferences.
Yep.
So what you see that we do may or may not work for you.
That's true.
But there's so many different configurations you can do for solar, and they all help. It just depends how much of it do you want to use.
The great thing about solar is you don't have to worry about any trees being in the way for solar panels when you're out, especially at anchor. So it's a really good option for boaters.
And of course, I think one of you mentioned it, maybe Gregory, it is silent.
That's true.
Today you don't hear us generating anything
Yeah.
with a diesel engine or a gas generator.
Yep.
It's silent. And that's something we really like.
Yeah, that's really good. Next section is about more kind of day-to-day things. So Thomas asks, how do you do your laundry? And you might have seen an episode where we talked about living on a boat and our little sort of manual method of doing laundry, and that works really well for just two people having a little bit of laundry here and there.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about winter coats or anything sort of heavy like that. So doing a small load of laundry, hanging it out on the back is really great. And of course we do use laundromats from time to time, but I don't really like going into laundromats, so I'll avoid that and just prefer to do it on the boat.
Yeah, and I help where I can. I'm the spin cycle. So, even though I'm not usually in the videos you see the laundry, and I'm not the prime, I have a role.
Yeah, everybody has to help.
Everybody has to help.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a question from Thomas. Thank you. Lauren asks, as you move farther south, is your plan to catch and eat fish as you go?
Good question, Lauren. The answer really is no. And it's primarily because there's different jurisdictions in the States, and you have to get fishing license for each of those jurisdictions. There's not a federal governing rule. So that's just too difficult to do. The one exception is probably going to be when we get to the Bahamas, because you can get a fishing license for all of the Bahamas when you actually check into the country. And I would love to see if we can catch some fish that are, very specific to the Bahamas.
Something different.
Something different.
Yeah.
And those we will eat. But at this point, no, I think we're going to go to the grocery stores and get our fish. We're not going to be putting a line in the water.
But you do fish here.
I do.
And you have a license to fish here.
I do.
And it's typically catch and release. So.
And a word of warning, if you're coming up here to do the loop, but I was actually pulled over by the conservation officers to check my license way out in a very remote part of the North Channel. And so we had a nice conversation with the guys. They checked me right there and then whether it was valid, which it was. And they wished me on my way. So it's just something to be aware of. Fishing license, you need to make sure that whichever jurisdiction you're in, you've got the appropriate fishing license. Good. But thanks.
Stephanie asked, do you two ever stop for a bite to eat at a restaurant or typically buy groceries and cook on the boat?
Well, we never stop. we go. No, that's not true.
So we typically buy groceries and eat on the boat. That's a very nice, comfortable way to work. But it is a treat to stop and have a meal at a restaurant, and we prefer to eat on a patio outside, or we'll stop and get a little treat like an ice cream or go to a bakery or something.
Yeah, even yesterday we were at a particular location. There was a farmer's market, so we just happened to stop in, have a look around, and they had some things that we just couldn't resist, so we picked those up. So yeah, you find places, and sometimes you find a great patio that you're hungry at the right time, and you can go in and enjoy that.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you. Ian asks, what is your source of Wi-Fi and cell service? So we each do have a cell phone in Canada with our own SIM card, and we will get SIM cards in the United States when we go through there.
We will.
We also have on the boat Wi-Fi.
We have something called a PepLink Max Transit Duo, which is a cellular modem that is very similar to the modems you'd see on aircraft or trains or buses. And it allows, it's fairly robust. It allows us to really have a whole Wi-Fi network on the boat, and it connects to the cellular towers, whether they be AT&T, Rogers, Bell. You have to have SIM cards, but it does connect to them. So that's what we use for our major connection. And then our cell phones they augment that. So it really allows us a bunch of options as to how we connect. And I fully expect when we hit the States, we'll get eSIMs for our cell phones, and we'll get a couple of SIM cards for the cellular modem. So we'll have a lot of options, because in some cases AT&T doesn't work, T-Mobile works, and we don't want to have roaming charges when we get down into the States for our Canadian plans. Canadian
cell phone plans are kind of expensive. I think they're one of the most expensive in the world.
They are, and you can go bankrupt by just having one phone call in the States on a Canadian SIM card. So we need to be very careful that we don't use those Canadian SIM cards there.
Good question.
Yeah, great question.
So Stan has a couple of questions. He's asking for more living expenses while doing the loop, like fuel costs, dock fees, lock fees, and expenses that we hadn't predicted. That's kind of tricky because it's very individual. It's specific to your boat, specific to your own personal lifestyle choices. So if you are a person or family, a couple who eat out all the time, and you plan to do that on a loop, those expenses are probably going to be the same.
Yeah.
If you only go to the grocery store and buy groceries and you do the same on the boat, it's going to be the same. Fuel is specific to the size of your boat.
Yep.
You can calculate that yourself with your own boat based on how far you plan to go and the route you plan to take. Dock fees and lock fees,
they're really calculated based on the size of your boat as well. It's per foot.
Yep.
So really, what we were talking about this because we were thinking, okay, how do we best explain it?
Yeah.
Well, your lifestyle is your lifestyle. It's typically going to be the same lifestyle on a boat as it is on a home. There'll be some minor changes, but I mean, if you like to go out and eat, you will. If you prefer to eat in, you're probably going to eat the same food, and it's going to be on the boat. But those variables, those differences, will be the fuel, the maintenance, and where you take the boat. So where do you store it, or where do you go to marinas, or do you actually go in the lock wells or mooring balls? Those things are fairly easy to calculate. They're not difficult to do. And you could spend hours going into what we spend on various things, but it's very unique to what we do, and you probably wouldn't do the same thing we're doing.
I think it might depend on the waterway too. So right now we're anchoring as much as we can, and we won't be able to anchor in some of the narrow rivers. So that will be very specific to the location. Yeah,
it will. So it's a hard question. I've seen many. I also look at a bunch of YouTube channels myself. Many YouTube channels struggle to talk about what it really costs, and they get into all sorts of detail. A lot of it is very, very unique and specific to the individual, and many of it is lifestyle based versus boat based. If you know how many gallons per hour your boat burns, typically you can easily calculate out what you think your fuel is going to be, and then add 10-20%, because you never know what those fuel costs are going to be, or if you decide to go off on a different direction for a while to look at something else. So it's not really an answer to your question, other than to say your lifestyle would dictate all of those things you eat and all of that. Your boat will dictate some of those hard costs. And I've heard maintenance costs per year, you should try and calculate about 10% of your boat price. Do you? It really depends on how you use your boat and where you use it.
Yeah. Okay, good question though.
Yeah, very good question.
Stan, you have another question. Do you know of any loopers traveling with dogs? Do they have any tips on live aboard boat life with dogs? Well, we have met a lot of people who have dogs. We don't know them specifically, And I think the main issue for them is having a dinghy and taking their dog to shore so they can do their business. That's the main thing that I don't know. I think we know some fellow loopers that have cats that just stay on the boat all the time. I guess they're like house cats. I don't really know anything more about that.
No, me neither. I mean, we've also walked the docks in marinas, and you see these big astroturf green carpets, if you like, that are for their dogs.
In their back of their boat.
Whether they use them or not, I can't say, but they're definitely there. And I think it's, as long as I understand it, and don't take my word for it, but as long as all your dogs or their cats are vaccinated and have everything up to date, as per vets, you can get across the border. But that's something you should check into if you are crossing the border. I think the Canada-US border is pretty good that way. Other borders perhaps not, but check it before you go.
The last section is about our boat. And quite a few questions actually about the boat itself. So Steve is asking, do you recommend the Mainship 390 as a full-time live-aboard? It's fine for us to live aboard for this year. I'm not sure how long people, I mean, I think it's pretty sufficient for most people.
I think it is. I mean, for us, it's, would we live more than this year? I don't know. But as far as living on it for the loop, which we're going to take a year to do, I think it's more than adequate. I mean, there's
room enough for us to be apart from each other a little bit. You don't want to be beside each other 24 hours a day.
No, and
7 days a week.
And listen, there's still the dinghy.
Right? Malcolm will go out fishing. That gives me a little space too. That's good.
Yeah, so I got a little 10-foot dinghy, and Rachel gets the 39-foot boat. I think that's a pretty good ratio. Yeah.
Okay, Jerry says, what horsepower is your engine? He also asks about the efficiency of the engine. Thomas asks, what's your fuel burn at cruising speed? These are all very related questions. So let's answer that. We have a Yanmar 370 horsepower single engine. We run or use about 3 to 3.5 gallons per hour and travel at about 7.5 knots average. That's
right. So the only thing I'd add to that, which is perfect, is the Yanmar 370 is a turbocharged engine. So it's not that makes a huge difference to our boat. We're not using the turbo a great deal at 7.5 knots. But so far it has been excellent. It certainly seems to be, touch wood, a very reliable engine at this point. And we did get the 1,000-hour maintenance on it in advance of the 1,000 hours, just to make sure that we had new impellers and fan belts and the rest of it ready to do this loop. So those are great questions.
And Nick also asked about those questions and also asked about the cylinders, 6 cylinders.
There are 6 cylinders. I mean, if anybody wants to look it up, I believe it's a 6LYA-STP. That's a Yanmar engine. You can look at that. For those that fell asleep when I said that, then you can just ignore it. But the nice thing about this engine and this hull is they're fairly efficient. They're not coming up on plane. And I think the hull speed of this boat is around 8 knots. So that's where you get your most efficiency.
And that's at 19 RPMs.
Yeah.
The fuel capacity is 300 US gallons with 2 tanks, one on either side. And that is 1,135 liters in metric. And the water storage, just for interest, is 150 US gallons. And that is 568 liters.
Yes, we have a lot of tankage on the boat.
Yes.
Which is great. Great for our range. We can go a long way without having to fill up any diesel. And actually, we can even take advantage of lower prices if we find that the diesel prices are lower further away, so we can fill up there.
Yeah.
And Nick also asks, what's the displacement of the boat? The displacement of the boat, not loaded. So there's two ways to look at it. One is, if all the tanks are empty, there's no stuff on it, you're about 22,000 pounds or 11 imperial tons. When we're loaded, we're a lot more than that. So I'm thinking we're around 15 tons of that's including all the tanks, the water, the stuff, the food. 11 tons empty and about 15 tons all loaded up.
Yeah, Nick also asked about the generator and the alternator when running the engine and all that. That we will address in the solar
We will.
episode.
And Nick, you got a lot of great questions. You're obviously looking at the heart of the whole boat and how we move. But the generator, we can say, I think you already have, it's an 8 kilowatt Kohler generator. It's got very few hours, it seems to be fairly well maintained. We use it every now and again. But yeah, there'll be future information on that in the solar episode.
So DB also asks, how is the stability of the semi-displacement hull underway and at anchor? Also asks if the 390 is appropriate to go into the Bahamas. So they do rent these boats actually in the Bahamas. So yes, it is appropriate to go to the Bahamas. And in terms of the stability, I think it's kind of like any trawler. We're at anchor right now. So you're asking at anchor. If a boat goes by really fast and wakes us, and it's on the beam, we're going to rock and roll a bit until the waves go away.
Yeah.
And that's and any boat that has stabilizers is going to feel that too, because they're not running their stabilizers while they're at anchor.
That's right.
While we're going along, it's not as comfortable when you get waves at the beam. We obviously don't try to do that.
Yeah.
But there's no stabilizers, so you will get a bit of rocking and rolling.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when you take the wind and the waves on the nose, it's all right. I mean, you get the jarring, but I think every boat gets that.
Yeah.
If you take it in a following sea with the wind behind you and the waves behind you, it's usually quite comfortable. We haven't been in big seas and we don't intend to be. But when you're on the beam, yeah, it's hard. It's harder than the other two, let's put it that way. And we really avoid it. To get stabilizers on a boat, it's typically a little more expensive to buy those boats, and there's a little more maintenance involved. So, I mean, I think it's comfortable for what we're doing. Would I go into the ocean and into big swells and take them on the beam?
No.
I don't think so.
And, when we're taking videos of big waves, I'm saying, whoa, look at those big waves. It really doesn't show on the camera at all.
No.
And we do notice it more up in the flybridge when we're going along. We do typically helm up here.
Yeah.
So you feel it more up here.
You do. I've gone down to the lower helm because we do have two helms. And it is quite a bit better down there. You're not sort of at the end of that stick that's flinging around when you're on the flybridge. Yeah. But even so, you avoid those times where it can be uncomfortable when you can. And there's no perfect boat for it. If you get stabilizers, those are things like Nordhavens and bigger, usually displacement boats. They can be more comfortable. You're still going to feel some of it. But I think they're cost prohibitive when you're doing the loop. They're things that perhaps you're over provisioning for to do the loop.
Yeah, and the draft is deeper too.
It is.
Yeah. So Cool Beans asks, what type or brand of anchor do you use? We have a Rockna with a roll bar, and it's 25 kilograms, and that is the same as 55 pounds. And we really like the anchor. It's always held for us. The only time it hasn't is if we're in a rocky bottom, but that's where an anchoring we didn't know. And no
anchor will hold. So Cool Beans, that's a great question because we like to anchor.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we really wanted to make sure we had was good ground tackle. And I believe Rockna makes a couple of types of anchors. I think the Vulcan is one which doesn't have a roll bar. And ours does. It's always reset, as I'm sure your many fellow boaters. You anchor one night, and when you wake up, you've turned around because the wind has shifted. We've never had a problem to date, again, touch wood, on the anchor resetting. So at this point, we really trust our Rockna.
Yeah. So last question is from Doug. Doug says they are currently sailors and they want to move to a trawler to do the loop, and wants to know our considerations and thought processes to moving to a trawler and understanding why maybe we chose that. So, with a trawler, I think if you're a 2-person team going to do the loop, you want to be able to make sure you can comfortably handle the boat, the two of you by yourselves. It shouldn't be so big that you can't handle it, the two of you, but it should be big enough to live on.
Yes.
I think we sort of said that in our boat episode.
And I think that's something we both agreed that it's got to be big enough, and that is many times that's a dependency of the individuals, because if the individuals can handle a 26-foot Ranger tug, fantastic. But I think for us, this 39 is a good size. Are there things that we would have looked at?
Yeah. An ideal boat with, if we had an unlimited amount of money.
If the budget wasn't a question.
Yeah, we would prefer to have no canvas on the flybridge on top. So when it rains, you don't get any, if really heavy rain, you might get some leaks or whatever.
Yeah.
A hard top or ideally a pilot house would be really nice.
Yes. We looked at, not seriously to buy, but we certainly looked at Nordic tugs. I was looking at K.D. Krogan's, Nordhavens. These are, I think, very nice boats. American tugs, really nice pilot houses, but the pilot house really separates the helm from the salon and the kitchen. But at the end of the day, it does come down to economics, and it comes down to availability. And
maybe how long you plan to keep the boat.
That's right.
If you're going to have it for a long time, then you might want to put that investment in.
That's right. I mean, if we were going to do long-term cruising, more than a year, more than a great loop, then yeah, perhaps we would have looked at some of those types of boats, because they give a little more longevity to comfort, and they're certainly built very well to handle different kinds of conditions. This one is built almost purpose-built to do the loop. There are so many of these main ships that are, I think, really well fit out for the loop. And they do it year on year in. So it's great for us. I think if in the perfect world with an unlimited budget, I'll say it, we would have probably gone Nordhaven, but the keel's too deep for Nordhaven.
So that's not good for the loop.
So it wouldn't work for the loop for us, for the one we were looking at. So this one, I think it's been working out really well for us. We're over almost 60 days on the boat, and we're still sitting here, enjoying each other's company. So that's a good thing. So it seems to be working for us.
So that concludes our episode for our Q&A, and hopefully that answers all your questions. And if you have any more, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.